Welcome to My Life Chassidus Applied, episode 243. We are about to enter the month of Shevat. Yesterday we benched Shabbos Mevorchim Shevat, and on Monday will be Rosh Chodesh Shevat. Today is Erev Rosh Chodesh, and tonight is the beginning of Rosh Chodesh Shevat. So we'll talk about that as we always do on a timely basis, the events on the calendar, as well as this week's Parsha, which is now the beginning of Parsha Boy. And of course, always in the context of Chassidus Applied, which is applying it to our personal lives based on the general principle that Torah is Meloshen Hera. The word Torah itself comes from the meaning directive, guide, a directive in life. Torah is Chaim, as the Rebbe would always say, Hera b'chaim, a blueprint for life. So, being that we're entering the month of entering Rosh Chodesh Shvat, so let's begin with that. In the year Tov Mem Beis, which would be 37 years ago, the Rebbe spoke. It was Shabbos Parsha Ve'era. This Shabbos yesterday, the Rebbe had a farbrengen. It was Mevorchim, of course, Shabbos Mevorchim, and it was the same kfiyas, the same schedule like this year, where Rosh Chodesh was on Monday. And one of the lessons that Rebbe learned and derived from that schedule, everything was precise. Everything is precise, and everything has a lesson for us. So even when a schedule of Rosh Chodesh comes out on a Monday or a Sunday or a Tuesday or whatever day it comes out, and is able to come out, that also has lessons. It's one of the so-called lesser focused upon tremendous directive that we received from the Rebbe was everything was precise. Even the schedule of something, not just the Chodesh Shvat itself, but what day in the week it comes. And the Rebbe then, in his inimitable way, explained that by Chassidim there's an expression by the Rabbeim, by Chassidim nishtokem b'meila. There's no such thing as just automatic. When the Chodesh Shvat comes out on a Sunday, so then you're going straight from Shabbos, that blesses into Sunday, it's almost like automatic. The fact that it comes after a day, a Sunday, a day of Aveda where we work, emphasizes that nishtokem b'meila. Everything has to come with effort. That's the lesson we learned from this kfiyas. Now, of course, in the context of Shvat, especially by Chassidim, Shvat is the month, 10th of Shvat will be this year, the beginning of the 70th year of the Rebbe's leadership, 70th year also of the Hilul of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So it has specific relevance to that. But first, the first lesson is the nishtokem b'meila. There's an expression in the Talmud, Yerushalmi talks about someone who came into a shul, came to a minyan, and he heard Meidim menafshei kara. He was so accustomed to bowing, doing Meidim, that we say, that menafshei kara, without even concentrating, without even deliberating on it, he just bent down. So on one hand, that sounds like a tremendous thing. A person is so trained that he doesn't even have to think about it. He's so trained in Kedusha that it comes automatically. But there's times that it explains that, no, it didn't come with Aveda, like he explains in Tanya Perek Tazvav, which is the chitas of these days, the importance of effort. That if it's routine and habit, even if it's a holy habit and a sacred one, it doesn't have that effort, pushing yourself a little more, as he cites there from the Gemara in Menachos, that says that in the times of the Talmud, the custom was to study and review that which you've learned 100 times. The Gemara calls that lo yavodai. It's not called aveda because it was the custom 100 times. Who learns to review something 100 times? But that was their routine. The 101st time, this pamach, as the Alter Rebbe says, this one time over the 100, and you can only reach it after you have 100. That in echus and quality, machriya is more powerful than the 100 because you've gone out of the routine. No memela. It's not coming automatically. And that's a very powerful lesson in so many areas in life where often we ask ourselves, why can't things just come easy? Why do I have to make an effort? But it's actually a gift that was given to us, that we have the power to be creators. We have the power to be initiators, that we can initiate. And when we do so, we become a partner in the process. If it's a mamela thing, that's why it says in the Gemara, the famous Gemara Megillah, if someone says, Lo yagaitu matzosi al taimin, someone says, Yagaiti v'le matzosi al taimin, Yagaiti matzosi. Effort brings the results. Effort. And you'll think, even on a secular level, ask Anyone who's successful, they'll all tell you how much persistence and sweat is even more important than a good idea. Seeing it through, that effort. So we have that lesson, a general lesson in life, a Chassidus applied type of lesson. I'm not stuck in Memela. Should things to deliberate upon things. Obviously, it's nothing wrong with having good habits and good routines that you naturally and instinctively and reflexively respond. But a person who thinks about things always adds more to it, not just what he does by rote or mechanically. And of course, in Judaism itself, doing something mechanically and by rote, though it has some value, but it's not the passion and the pneumius and the vitality and the dynamic investment that we have when we do something with that type of deliberate effort is a completely different quality of commitment and quality of even product when you have that type of personal relationship. Which of course is also a lesson in how we teach our children and our students and each other and anyone we come in contact with, not just enough to inspire, not enough just to inform and educate, but to empower that there's that they should own it and want to make an effort, not just give it to them on a platter, but also make it an effort that it's worthwhile, the effort, and teaching people that it's so valuable that they will go and make an effort even when you're not there, when the teacher or the parent or the mashpia is not in their presence, they will have owned it because they earned their way. And that earning, as the Gemara says in Butman, it says, a person desires one measure of his own effort, then 9 that he receives as a gift. He or she receives as a gift. But you can buy 9 times as much with 9, but it's not yours. And you'll see when you get something as a gift, it's far easier to scrounge the opportunity. But when you work for it, even if it's only one measure of 9, it has a certain qualitative value. No b'mela. Now, how does that apply regarding Shevat? That's a lesson in general, because the whole meaning of Chassidus is exactly that. There should be no b'mela. The Yiddishkeit should not be mechanical Judaism. It should not be by rote or by routine, but with an effort, with some form of commitment and some form of investment. So, of course, as we go into the Shevat, comes for Shabbos and Baruch and what's close to our hearts is that this is the month, 10 days from Yud Shvat. As I said, the Hilula of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the same day, Yud Shvat Tovshin Yud, the beginning of the Rebbe's leadership. What's the Rebbe saying? The first Fabrengi Yud Shvat Tovshin Yud Aleph, when he formally accepted the Nesius, right after the Maimer. Don't deceive yourself into thinking that I'm going to do the work for you. Everyone has their pekel. Everyone has their shtuz de klippe, shtuz de le'umazeh, their so-called negative insanity. Things we do that are just not necessarily, like he says in the Maimon Bas Lagani, things we do just automatically, negatively. And each of us has to work on ourselves and make our effort. The Rebbe said, I don't decline from helping, but basically I meet you halfway. Aveda b'keyach atzmei, no b'mela. So specifically the lesson this year's Kvi is that it comes on Monday after a day of effort is even more relevant when it comes to the issues of Shvat. Now Rosh Chodesh Shvat also has the power that the beginning of Sefer Dvorim, the 5th Chumash, when Moshe Rabbeinu knows that he has 37 days until Zayin Oder, when his neshama would go back Lamaila. So he says, Elu Dvorim Asher Diber Moshe. These are the words that Moshe said on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, and he began Bayeres HaTeira Hazes. He began to explain the Teira. So the Rashi says, and from the Medrash, that B'shivim Loshen began to translate it into 70 languages. What's the significance of that? All the Jews knew Hebrew. They received the Teira by Matan Teira. It was not in 70 languages. The significance is that Teira should be brought and made relevant and palatable and accessible in every language. Language refers not just to physical languages, but also to the idioms, to the way you present an idea, that it should be zugänglich in Yiddish, they say, relevant to the person that's being taught to. So we know Mishnah Teira, which is the 5th book, is what Moshe Mepi Atzmei Omri. Moshe said it, and that's why much of the book is written in the language Moshe speaking to the Eden. It's all Teira min Hashemayim, but the 4 books, the first 4 books, is Hashem speaking, or B'shlishem Medaber, like a third person. Here Moshe is speaking. So Teira, so it says in Svarim, Chassidus elaborates that this is when Moshe was internalizing it and giving to them, in a sense, that we integrate. No b'meila. It's not a b'meila. It's through the Aveda. After hearing the Torah min hashamayim, which is a gift, matan Torah, a gift from above. Now, what are you going to do? Not just listen. You now have to absorb, process, and internalize it, and then digest it and present it. And that's what Moshe did. Similar to what it says in Elam Mishpatim, Asher Tosim Lifneihem. Like a Shulchan Aruch, he has to present a teacher. Moshe Rabbeinu teaches it in a way that's presentable to the student. Not just saying, here are the words from heaven. Again, the emphasis on Pnimi is the emphasis on effort, the emphasis on internalizing it. Shevat, and that's what the Frierdiker Rebbe did. The Rebbe explains in the Sikha Membeis and many other places that he began to translate the Frierdiker Rebbe, that is, Chassidus in many languages, physically in other languages, and also explaining it in ways that people who do not necessarily, not familiar with the original language can relate to. And of course the Rebbe took it to a completely other dimension. The Shvat, as it leads to the Shchedesh, the head of the month of Shvat. Connection to the Parsha. So of course, Ve'era Boy is a continuation of Parsha Shmeish, which is all Golus Mitzrayim. But in this week's Parsha, in the middle of the Parsha, we also begin the Geula. HaChedesh Hazel Lachem, and the Eibishter telling Moshe Rabbeinu in Mitzrayim that on the 15th day of this month, the new moon, you will be redeemed, you will lead the Jews out of Mitzrayim, Be'etzem Hayeh Mazeh. And that becomes the Geula in the middle of Parsha Boy. So in the depths of the abyss of Mitzrayim, from the word constraints and limitations, begins the story, this narrative, and the actual redemption. And that would be marching out of Mitzrayim and the rest of the story as the Jews go on their journeys all the way till the end of the Torah, when they come to the east bank of the River Jordan, ready to go into Eretz Yisrael. So, Ve'era, of course, is the last Makis and is the darkest time of the Golus. The Golus became more dark and more difficult and more oppressive for the Jews. And yet, right before the dawn is always the darkest moment. And that's when Moshe ultimately broke with the Koyach of the Eibush to the Klippa of Pare. Pare was called Tanin HaGodl, the great serpent, reflecting and representing serpent, or great alligator, or great crocodile, different ways they translate it. But it represented the power of the negative energy. And Pare was not a simple person, power of negative, which is why the Zohar says, in the beginning of this week's Parsha, why does it say Boy al Pare? Boy means come to Pare. It should say Lech al Pare, go to Pare, as it does say several times earlier. And the answer is because as Moshe was engaging with Pare, the first he was dealing with the outer, more superficial surface levels of this negative energy, of this diabolical and arch enemy of anything that's holy. A person who said, I don't know this God, a person who considered himself God, a person who was literally ruled with an iron hand the Jewish people and this country. So first Moshe was so-called dealing with his more outer dimensions. But as he got closer and closer to dealing with the Parik to the core, Moshe says, Dochel, he became afraid. He began to tremble. He was afraid to go into the inner chambers of this klippa, of this difficult and negative energy, meeting the Hitler of the generation with all the power that he had. So Moshe was afraid. So Hashem says, Boy el Pari, come with me. You don't go alone. Come with me. And Moshe then went along. What's the significance? Hashem didn't go with Moshe earlier. But there, it wasn't so important to emphasize. Because Moshe felt he had the koyach of Hashem and he went. Here he needed to have deeper koyachas, basically. Greater strengths, because he was dealing with the greater darkness. To break that, he needed Hashem. So the Rebbe in Ve'era Membeis also brings the Maimer that the Rebbe Rashab said in Tofresh Ayin Zayin, 102 years ago. The year would be 1917. They said a Maimer Pasha Ve'era of Re'ena Saticha. And at the end of the Maimer, or the whole Maimer, but especially at the end, he talks about tzaddikim have the power to break and bring down even the most negative forces, the Rishayim of their generation. Except there are exceptions. When a Rosh is given power, for whatever reason, God's mysterious ways, it's not so simple. A tzaddik cannot necessarily contend with it. However, when he goes with the power of the Eibush, that he could. He speaks there about tzaddikim of the different levels, and the Rebbe said that in the Sikha Membeis, that some Chassidim or Masim Lev noticed that was the time when Nikolai, the Tsar, the last Tsar of Tsarist Russia, who was a Tzeder Yisrael, a hater of Jews, was overthrown by the revolution around that period of time. So what the Alter Rebbe Shab said is relevant to the time that he was in then. And the Rebbe then said, V'hi Ratzon, he was talking about a Sim Sefer Torah that was taking place that week. The first Sim Sefer Torah Kloli, the Rebbe spoke about, and he said, V'hi Ratzon, the Sim Sefer Torah should accomplish the same, to basically eliminate the negative forces. I don't know if we know exactly what the Rebbe was referring to, or he was speaking in general. But what you see from this is that the lessons from Pasha Ve'era and Boy, which are connected as the Rebbe connects in that Sikha, and I definitely encourage you to look it up, are lessons that are also in our times. The power of Gedusha, the power of holiness, the power of light to dispel darkness, even the harshest and the darkest form of darkness, because we don't go alone. Come with me. That times when we're given power, and the Eibishter, so to speak, is behind the scenes. Then there are times when we need more kayach. God says, I'm going with you. So there's no circumstance, both on the personal pari in our lives, the personal mitzrayim, when we have to sometimes deal with the darker moments of our lives, whether it's due to grief and sorrow or trauma, or it's due to different oppression, psychological fears, anything that goes into the category of mitzarim v'gvulim, which means the constraints, the inhibitions, the limitations, anything that traps you, that you feel trapped in. So there are times we feel some strength, and God is always giving us strength. The times that we may feel really fearful, we don't feel we can do it, and we want to retreat, so we say, Boyal Pare. And even the great Moshe Rabbeinu needed it on his level. So we all have a tremendous lesson from that. And of course, there's also Boyal Pare of Gedusha. Pari from the word is pariu. Kol neherin, pari also has, everything has a sherish, a root in the above. So if there's a pari very strong in the umazah, and the negative, there's also a pari of Gedusha. Like we say about Lovan. Lovan below is a thief, a gangster, a liar, a deceiver. But Lovan refers to Levin Elyon, the supernal whiteness of the highest levels of Atik and so on. Same thing, Pari. Pari also comes from this pari, which means the explosion or the bursting forth of all the lights and all the energies. So the Rebbe says, Shevat came in the week of Parsha Boy, it was Shabbos Parsha Boy when it happened, Tovshin Yud. So it came on one hand as a darkness, but on the other hand comes a tremendous light that comes with the Istalkus, as the Rebbe explains, Istalik Yikara de Kutchabricha B'Kol Alma, the power of bringing even a more powerful light of Boy. And that's what Moshe achieved. With Hashem's help, come with me, is able to transform the darkest. And what happens, Taka, next in this week's Parsha? In the middle of the Parsha, smack right in the middle, not even the next, comes the Geula. After 210 years of oppression. The lesson to us is that there's always the hope. God is with you, God goes with you, God comes with you. And holds your hand and has that and gives the strength to deal with any difficult, any situation in life. Now, in our case, we have the Moshe Rabbeinu within us. We have the Rebbe within each one of us, the Moshe of each generation, and this is also with the Kayach of the Eibishter inside of Moshe, the Boyel, El Pare. Okay. Many, many lessons can be derived from this. For more on this topic, I'll cross-reference to episodes 52, 98, 146, and 197. Okay. With that, let me already make some housekeeping announcements. Excuse me. One is that, as I just said, cross-referencing, all these episodes are archived. You can access them at meaningfullife.com/mylife. And if you go to the YouTube version on a desktop or laptop, you can actually see the timestamps and go straight to the topic you want without having to listen to all of it. It's automatically linked there. We set it up every week. You can also download these programs, podcasts, as a podcast to listen on the go, on a car, or exercising, or whatever it may be. And of course, there you'll also find a forum where you can submit any question anonymously, confidentially, completely. If you want us to respond, either because you want some material or you want a personal connection, you have to put your email in there, because we have no way of tracing it, and we have no way of knowing who you are. So you have that total confidentiality. Okay. I should also mention, since we're already talking about it, we announced that this year's 5th annual My Life Chassidus Applied Contest, which is, the gates are open, people are submitting. Of course, take your time. The deadline is Zayin Adar Aleph, February 12th, I believe. Yes. And you have time, you can go on meaningfullife.com/contest for all the guidelines, the rules, and all the details. And anyone can win. Literally. We made especially a level playing field. So you can't possibly win. $10,000, $3,600 is the second prize. Third prize is $1,000. And then we have a special track, special student prize of $500. They also are eligible for the higher prizes, but that prize is exclusively for students. So a student will win $500. And it's always exciting to see the enthusiasm and the commitment, and the essays that come in are always unbelievable. It's a great opportunity, so please take advantage. We'll be talking about that more in coming episodes, some tips. But if you go online, you can find not only guidelines, we also have tips and different ways to submit a winning essay. Okay, with that, let us go. One more final announcement is, of course, the issue of sponsorships. This program is not possible without your support. So please be generous and help us either dedicate a program in memory of a loved one or in honor of a loved one, to go to meaningfullife.com/sponsorship. meaningfullife.com/sponsorship. Okay. Now let us go to some questions. And of course, we'll start with a contemporary question that just breaking news in the Chabad world this past week. How should we react to the recent Mezuzah controversy? So yes, we received letters, and I'm sure you've heard about this. So if you haven't heard about it, let me just be specific what we're talking about here. Controversy has broken out about what is being sold by the Sofrim, by the scribes, by the Mochri Sfarim, those that sell mezuzahs in this community, in the Crown Heights community, and other communities. Is it up to standard? Is it kosher? Is it not kosher? And a debate raging from all different perspectives. We got the perspectives of the stores, well, it all started with a young man who decided to do an investigation and came to a conclusion that many of the mezuzahs are not kosher. You have the comments from the stores that sell these mezuzahs. You have comments from sofrim, scribes, from rabbonim, from people in the street. Everybody has entered the fray. Initially, I was not going to speak about it precisely because everyone's talking about it. What do I need to talk about? But I do want to share a few words that I think just to bring a little, sanity into this discussion. We are a Jewish people. We're here for over almost 3,800 years, formally from the time of Avram Avinu. Matan Torah is over 3,300 years ago. There have been controversies as like this and bigger ones. Thank God, God blessed us with a Torah. We're not living in the dark. We have directives. I mentioned Torah Meloshen Hara. Torah has directives for us. No matter what the situation, Torah has a response. Why is that so vital? Because all of us are subjective. All of us have opinions. And they could be good opinions. We may be brilliant. But we're subjective. So God blessed us. He gave us a Torah at Har Sinai. But more importantly, the Torah has a methodology that can be applied in every given situation. And that's why day after day we have a Maseda. We have the Chachomim of each generation as they codified the Torah, first Torah Shebiksav, from the Eibishter, then Torah Shebal Peh, Torah B'Pirusha Nitna, which in turn became Halachas, which what we call today Shulchan Aruch, starting from the Rambam, the Rosh, and other poskim. And it's a long literature, a long body of scholarship that goes in an unbroken chain of how you determine every question. So the first thing everyone has to ask ourselves, each one of us asks, what does the Torah say? Not what I say, not what this young man says, not what the stores say, not what Abonim say, not what the Sofrim say. What does the Torah say? So the Torah says to go to a Rav. A Rav, not because he's a smart guy, not because he's a good guy, because he's a person who knows what it says in the Torah. Sofrim also have a certain authority. Writing a Sefer Torah or a film or mezuzahs is not a simple matter. Not everybody can just sit down and write. There are real rules. Now, of course, there are different opinions. And the Gemara talks about it, and then Halacha talks about it. And we know there's B'diavad, and there's L'chatchila, There are things that are for sure possible koladeis, completely unacceptable as far as a mezuzah goes. There are things that are kosher l'choladeis, and there are things that some say you can get, but the evidence it's acceptable. But if you're machmir, you should not do it. There's Shulchan Aruch for all these things. We don't have to make up new halachas, and we don't need to find new authorities. So the way I would look at it is very straightforward. Okay, this hashgacha pratis, this came up. Whether the fellow did it the right way, should he have gone and publicized names and stores and so on? It's after the fact. I'm not going to go make a judgment call on that. But hashgacha pratis, now that it's on the table, we're Torah Eden. Got in the Himmel. So let's look what the Torah says. What does that mean? If a mezuzah, you have a question, you go to a store, you buy a mezuzah. Now you're relying that they have someone that checked it. Remember, every store has an negiyah because they're selling something. So al pi halacha, everyone's an negiyah b'davar. Negiyah b'davar means can be a relative, it can be a financial gain, or some other prejudice. So the Torah addresses that too. That's why you have objective rabbis, objective scribes, who look at something if case there's a question. Now there are, obviously, people have certain sofrim they trust, they have certain scribes they trust, they have certain stores they trust. If, however, for some reason, I'm not even saying it's legitimate, a question has come up, should you trust this scribe or this store, is a simple process. Take the mezuzah or whatever it is that we're in question and bring it to an objective person and let him look at it. This is what Torah says. And the objective person is not a person off the street, it's a person who's trained, who knows, first of all, Shulchan Aruch, knows how to look at a mezuzah and at a parchment and at the letters and exactly how it's written, and can say, this is a kosher mezuzah. However, if you were machmir, it would be, a few things should be amended. Or it's possible. It's either possible, kosher, or could be done better. And this, again, there are rules for all these things. Everything is addressed. If I was managed a store or owned a store, what I would do, which is what you see, lahavdil, what the Goyish world does. If someone questions your credibility, instead of becoming defensive or anything, what you should do is, on the contrary, say, yes, I care about my standards. I want you as a customer. I want people to know that you can trust me. You come out with a campaign and say, you know what? We'll appoint objective rabbanim or objective sofrim who will check anything. You have a question, they will check it. And they won't be biased because they're not going to be paid by me. Maybe it's a collective fund. I don't know. We have to figure out how. This is not because there's necessarily anyone saying they did anything wrong, but that's what you do. You go overboard when you want to have customers, when you want to be credible. Everyone knows the famous story with Tylenol. Just bring it as an example. Tylenol was found laced with, God forbid, some people died from it. I'm not even comparing it. Lahavdil elef avdolas. So Tylenol, the company that owned it, this was it. They could have destroyed their whole company because that's all you needed. That it was laced. And they didn't know what to do. Some argued they should just ignore it, it'll blow over. Some said we should do comment on it. And they came out with an aggressive campaign that we are now going to do something that no one has ever done. Because of this happened, and we feel the responsibility to the public, we're going to create new safety hatches, latches, whatever it is, for covers, to avoid tamper-proof packaging. And they came out with a big apology, and it said tamper-proof. And they, not only did they continue their business, they doubled and tripled because they gained the credibility. I'm not suggesting the same here, because to say, I'm not going to come to a conclusion to say any mezuzahs were apostle, or that it caused any damage. But it's just a lesson. Even if it did, look what they did and how they gained the trust of the public. So I think this is an opportunity to be a Torah Eden, Chassidish Eden, look at the situation and take a bull by the horns and say, there's a Torah Shulchan Aruch, we have Rabbanim, we have Sofrim, let's find those objective people that can establish. That way everybody is absolved of the negiyas. Whether this young man, whether he had biases or not, I don't know, and I didn't investigate. Whether other people have biases, I'm not here to rule on it. But the Torah covers all bases, that's my point. And the bases especially are looking at a situation. It's not just with mezuzah, by the way. It's with any given situation where there's controversy. Thank God we have a Torah that helps us get through situations like this by looking at it objectively, dispassionately, by Torah people, and so on. Now, if indeed somebody besmirched and caused damage for no reason, that has to be addressed too. That also has Torah, there's also recourse with that. But overall, I'm talking now to each other as a public. You buy a mezuzah, whether you're buying it for yourself or you're buying it for someone else, or you're buying it for Mivtzoyim, by all means, you should ask whoever's selling the mezuzah, was it checked? And there's no problem. Go check it independently by someone else. You could say, why do I have to do that? You know what? We have mashgichim in restaurants. We have mashgichim that we have ashgachas on food. There's the concept of ashgacha. Now, if you find someone that you trust in the world of safras, by all means, it's all part of it. If they have those authorities. But since now things have come into question, adarab, let's use it to strengthen our commitment and strengthen our standards and do this in the Torah way. Now, do you think the Rebbe would answer anything different than this? If someone asked the Rebbe this question. A Torah mentioned the Rebbe. Chassidus is Torah, Chabad is Torah, everything is Torah. We follow the Torah. Now, has come out some new revelations, which I'm sure some of you are aware of. Here's a psak din, actually, a letter, I should say, from the Beis Din of Crown Heights, dated Chav Dalet Tevis Kislev Tovshem Mem Zayin, the Beis Din of Crown Heights, and they gave out 9 guidelines because they saw laxity and problems with mezuzahs. So once you have this is the rabbonim of this community, and the rabbonim of this community that everybody embraced, and the Rebbe endorsed. So all we have to do is follow of the things they said there, that they're saying that they don't refer to any particular story, or they definitely don't mention names. So they say that there's definitely an issue going on with the stam. Stam is again Sefer Torah Tefillin Mezuzah Rosh Tevis. They read regulations, so there should be no michshel, there should be no impediment in our community. Among the rules that they wrote was everything should go through a rigorous review, and that the writer should be, of course, God-fearing and expert, wherever they come from. And they actually banned, they said they should not have small mezuzahs where you can't see tagin, or there are no tagin, the crowns. So here's a rabbonim, this is from a rabbonim. Someone wants to question that? Adra mehechen dantuni, but it is coming from rabbonim of this community. You can rest assured this was Mem Zayin. I'm sure the Rebbe saw this. So I don't know if the Rebbe reacted to it, but we don't have anything negative about it. So there's one directive. It was also brought to my attention, I want to thank the family, the Blau family, of Mayor Blau's children, especially Rav Levi, brought to my attention that back in the year Tovshin Lamed Daled, which was right after the Rebbe began Mivtza Mezuzah, after the tragedy in Malot in Israel, so Mayor Blau, who's an Askin and a very proactive activist, came out with a big ad in the Jewish press that said over 80% of mezuzahs and tefillin are not kosher. And he goes on, of course, to make a call that people should be vigilant to make sure it's kosher. He wrote to the Rebbe and submitted this ad, and he said not only did he put the ad in, he also sent it to rabbis and to communities all over the country, both in Yiddish and in English. And he gives a list of things of why he did it, in order, obviously, to keep the standard and to prevent a real mikshel, a real problem, which is the laxity around making posel mezuzahs. The Rebbe answered, "V'hi rotzu shehei kol hanal b'atzlocha rabba askal atzion." So that was already back in 90. We're talking about 74, Shabbos Chazain time. And then there was unfortunately a tragedy in Tovshin Lamed Vov, with some shachtim got killed in an accident. So Mayor Blau again, Reb Blau, Olav HaSholem, wrote to the Rebbe about it, and he said that they went to check the mezuzahs, and the mezuzahs, unfortunately, for the people that were killed, was not kosher. So he says it's a very sensitive thing. He doesn't want to bring it up to the family. He wants to do it through family members, but he wants to know if the Rebbe is giving him directive, should he do something about it in a sensitive way. And the Rebbe writes, Keposhet, Shahariz al pi Shulchan Aruch, Kivin disra hamazel chulu, le'aleinu v'le'aleinu rachmanu litzlan. So the Rebbe says, Keposhet, you should do something about it, because that's what Pishul Chanorach. And the Rebbe in the parentheses says, because something happened negatively, so obviously you have to look in introspective, especially in the area of mezuzah and tefillin and Sefer Torah, as the Rebbe indicates very many times. And then the Rebbe writes, Asker Latzion. What's close to my heart as well, as he writes at the bottom, is because of this tragedy, he's printing in the newspaper of the Algemeiner a sikha about Shmiras HaMezuzah that was from that year, Pasha Ekev Tovshel Lamed Vov, was a sikha came out about the power of Mezuzah. Okay, good. So, well, we should only hear good news. I just wanted to share this all for the Shleimus Inyan. But to sum up, I think we have a Torah. I know we have a Torah Eir. It's an illuminating Torah. I think when you go with that approach and you put aside all agendas, all personal agendas, all opinions, that's all that matters here. What does the Torah say? And the Torah has halachas regarding this. As I said, the details I discussed earlier, the details of halacha, something is kosher, muhudir, it could be kosher, not the tachlis ahidir, it could be apostle. And that needs to be determined not by people in the street, not by anybody. These are people with authority can determine this. Rabbonim and Sofrim that have the samchus, as the Rabbonim wrote, the Yerushalayim, and all the requirements that a sefer has in Torah, Api Torah. Okay. And I'd love to hear any comments or feedback. With that, let us also, I want to say one more thing from the Psak then, from Tovshim Mem Zayin, that Rabbonim also said, they also demanded all Sofrim and Magim in the neighborhood, Crown Heights, appear before the Badatz, before the Bezdin, and show their credentials that they revisit the halachas of Stam Shulchan Aruch at least once a year. I would submit, not as a Rav, but as just a practical suggestion, it's always good to have a second person checking anything. Now, of course, different opinions in Shulchan Aruch, but a sefer or a Rav that checks knows those halachas, and they can say, it's not possible, but it's not tachlis hahidur. Having two people who don't know of each other is always a healthy thing, especially now that there's been a controversy, so why not be even extra careful, so we know exactly what we're dealing with, and so on. And hopefully we all follow what Torah says. Torah is darcheo, darkei neim, v'chol nesiv shalom. Everything of Torah is meant to bring shalom and peace, and not create definitely divisiveness and arguments. And if we follow Torah, we all submit to what the Torah says, that is the best way that we'll find resolution here, that will be without any extra agmas nefesh, or any personalization, or any damage to anybody. Okay, because what the Torah says is the best for everyone, whoever is involved. With that, let us move to other questions. Is there an intrinsic value to keep Chassidus in its pristine state and not try applying it to specific situations? Hi, Rabbi Jacobs. Thanks for sending out your video weekly. It creates a positive start to my week, and it feels good to know that you cover the week's Parsha as well as Jewish holidays that are relevant that week. I learned the Sikha this week, and the Rebbe explains that Moshe, his job was to break the klippa of Mitzrayim, and his brother Aaron was to take the message that Moshe would convey in Hebrew, which Paro did not understand. And like Rashi says, Yamlitzenu v'yatimenu. In other words, Aaron brought it and explained it to Paro. So Moshe was like the pristine form of what God said to break the klippa. And Aaron brought it down to his level to make sure he understands the message. My question to you is, there a concept of keeping Chassidus, the words of the Rabbeinu, Moshe Rabbeinu, in their pristine state, and not try to apply it to specific cases? Like, in other words, like Moshe, not like Aaron. If not, then what's this concept of Moshe just saying things the way they are, and how does that apply to us? Thanks. So the questioner obviously is questioning the premise of this program. Chassidus applied, a Maimer Chassidus, or a Sikha, is said by the Rabbeim, Divrei Elokim Chaim, we have the original, and just read that. Is there an inyan in that? Or do you have to always apply it to a personal situation? So of course the answer is obvious. Of course there's an inyan in that. Not only that, that's where it all begins. When the Rebbeim said a maimer, we know it was mezachich the avir. It refined the environment, the atmosphere. And their words are holy. That's why when we chazan a maimer by bar mitzvah, or by a wedding, or in general on a Shabbos, you chazan a maimer, you chazan the ois ba'os, eis yisadav. And we don't add explanation. Sometimes we add a little to make it a little more explainable, but not much. So that's like the pure words of Moshe. But we're also told that we have to learn Chassidus. We have to learn and understand it. So there's the union of learning the words, and of course that has the most power. We know that Abbeims had certain Maimorim, they said, was that they would repeat for the different birurim they needed at that time. And as I said, we chazer it over. But then there's the union of explaining Chassidus, internalizing it. Like anything in Torah, you learn Torah Shebiksav, even lo yodamai kamar, even if you know what it says, the words are holy. But then the Torah has a mitzvah to understand, la foshaba, to study it, immerse yourself, yegia, as I discussed earlier. Understand it, argue about it, internalize it. It's not a contradiction. So of course there's an union of the Moshe of Torah and there's the Aaron of Torah, where Aaron translates and brings it down to the level of the people, in this case, Pari. And then there's the union of the Torah itself in its original form. There's no contradiction at all. So they both have value. The first one probably has even more power because it's the original words, but the second has more internalization. And this is discussed in many places, that Torah is like Elokus, but then there's Elokus as it's in Slavish, as it manifests in our seichel and our understanding of it. Generally, the difference between Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh. In Torah Shebal Peh Gufa, there's levels. Same thing as in Chassidus. That there's the Torah Shebiksav of Chassidus, Tanya, but even the other Maimorim, that's straight from the Rabbeim, and there's the explanation of it. Famous story with Rabbi Hillel Parashah and the Tzemach Tzedek. They were sitting after a Maimon that Tzemach Tzedek delivered, and they were discussing the Havana, the understanding of the Maimon. Rabbi Hillel disagreed with the Tzemach Tzedek. So someone said to him, how could you disagree? Tzemach Tzedek himself said the Maimon. He says, when the Rebbe says the Maimon is Kinisinosa Sinai, it's like given at Sinai. Obviously, that's the Rebbe speaking. Sometimes the expression. The Shekhinah is speaking through his throat, through his mouth. But now we're talking understanding it. And here we're using Seichel to understand it. And here, the Rebbe, is that Rebbe Take? But this is a discussion for Torah, and we're learning Torah together. And here you could have room for disagreement. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu, when he said something from Hashem, obviously that's authority of Hashem. But then when Moshe sat with the Chachomim and they discussed something, Achrei Rab Lahatis, you go according to the majority, even if the majority is not according to Moshe. Though, of course, Moshe is respected for his understanding. Now, this could be elaborated upon, but the point is there are two elements to Chassidus, as there is to general Torah. I discussed this in different ACs, different ideas, in different episodes 59, 123, 132, 163, 165, 177, and 199. Different ideas about this whole basis of Chassidus, applying Chassidus to our personal lives. But that is absolutely the kavanah as well, to bring a bechein, a personalization of all these ideas. Each one of us, kol chad v'chad lefum sheyurid delay. Each person according to their measure and according to their needs, according to their unique perspective and approach, all based on the source without compromising that source. The Rebbe says, Tanya is eitzes. So of course Tanya itself is Tanya Kadisha, but it's eitzes. That means each of us can take the advice and the directives that the Rebbe says, each according to our way, Teira, Melosh, and Heira, as I mentioned earlier. Next question. What did the Rebbe mean by calling someone a plain-clothed chassid? Greetings, Rabbi Jacobson. One time at the local Chabad house, they showed some video clip, of people's reminiscences of the Rebbe. There was one man who said that the Rebbe referred to him as a plain-clothed chassid. Could you interpret for us what the Rebbe meant by this? I thought of it because of the recent flurry of concern expressed by some of your viewers as to what kind of yarmulke should be worn. Thank you and keep up the great work. Yeah, not just mezuzahs, there was a flurry of discussion about my yarmulke he's referring to specifically. Okay. Well, the expression plain clothes, of course, comes that somebody is dressed, like you say, a plain clothes policeman, dressed in plain clothes, not in a uniform. He's still a policeman, but he's dressed up in order to either camouflage himself in a way that he can get away with certain things, because if he's shown as a policeman, people would know who he is and they'd be careful. So this is more of like an undercover situation. My assumption is, when the Rebbe used that term, and I've heard it a few times, is that there are people who dress like a chassid. You look at them, you see a chassid gate. A person who's an overt and outright representative of the Rebbe and lives up to that standard, hopefully, and so on. But then there are people who were very much touched by Chassidus, by the Rabbeim, by the Rebbe. And they may not look the part, may not dress the part. But when you speak to them, you suddenly see this deep discussion and connection. You know they're loyal to the cause. Now, why they're dressed that way, whatever the reasons are. But the Rebbe was saying, basically, there are people like that are out there that are wherever they may be, and they're plain clothes chassid. They're a mensch of the Rebbe's a mensch, but he's dressed in a part that may be the levushim of the place where he's at. Like we say, Chassidus, you have to be dressing up the levushe hamizbarer. Of course, we have to always know it's to be al piter and halacha, but there are people, God forbid, whatever reason, they still have not embraced all of Torah, at least not in the levushim department, the garment department, but their heart and their soul and their actions even are completely committed. I've met people like this. I'm sure you have as well. That's how I would explain it. I just heard on Shabbos, actually, someone shared with me who is mashpia, was not a Chabad person. And when the Rebbe came out with mashpiyim, he wrote to the Rebbe, and the response was that your mashpia is the one that brought you to Yiddishkeit, even though it's not Chabad. So what does that mean? So I thought to myself, this idea, the plain clothes, that means, what is Chabad Chassid? We spoke about that about this last week. Chabad Chassid, at the end of the day, is the hashkafa of the Rebbe, a person who's living up to the directives and the philosophy and the approach, the perspective of the Rebbe. Now, obviously, there's dressing the part, and there's not always dressing the part. But you could also be someone who's in plain clothes and still propagating and perpetuating the Rebbe's message and the Rebbe's kavanah and fulfilling the Rebbe's mission to us in this world. So that's pretty straightforward. Next question. Mazel. Question about Mazel. Do Jewish people have luck? In Hebrew, we know the word Mazel. On one side, we say, Ein Mazel Yisrael. There's no Mazel for Eden. But then we say Mazel Tov. And I should add, when it comes, for example, each month of Shevat, month of Odar, Mazel Bori Mazel, that the Mazel is a healthy Mazel, it's a strong Mazel, and actually has implications even in halacha. If something is going bad by someone in life, can you say it's bad luck, or is it a punishment for his misdoings? And now, he should add a mitzvah, and then all his problems will be resolved. Has nothing to do with his luck. Thank you. So first I want to refer you to episode 198, where I spoke about zodiac and astrology. The brief answer is the following. Ein Mazel Yisrael, exactly right, because Mazel is part of how God created the world, and there's so-called laws of nature, and according to the laws of astrology. Like we say by Avram Avinu, he was subject to that. But then when Avram changed his name, Avraham, he no longer is bound by these guidelines because you're connected to the master himself. So the stars and all the different mazolis and constellations are God's handiwork. These are basically instruments of God. So instead of being subject to the instruments, we connect to the person who's created the person, to the entity that is the Balha instrument, which is all kegazim biyad ha'chesav. It's all like an axe in the hand of the axeman. So Jews have that direct connection, so they're not bound to mazolis. That doesn't mean, however, we do live in this world. So the Amshach of Elokus, which comes from higher than the mazolis, comes to us also through a mazel. So we'd say it doesn't control our lives, there's predispositions. That's why in the Chodesh Av, there's certain things we don't do. It's a Chodesh Adar is a month of Simcha. Chodesh Av is a sadder month. That doesn't mean we're bound by it, doesn't mean it controls our lives, but there's a predisposition, a so-called inclination. So the root is Ein Mazel Yisrael is higher than any Mazel. But it does come down, Hamshachas that come through different so-called personalities and characteristics that do affect us. But we're not bound by it, and we can always transcend it. Then there's the Untitled Chapter, Ein Mazel Yisrael, Ein Ayin Mazel Yisrael. Not that there is no Mazel, that Mazel of Yisrael is the level of Ayin, not Yesh, the level of Bittel, the Lakus. So that means both things. It means there is no Mazel, the Mazel as in a Yesh, that you're defined this way. Your Mazel is higher than Mazel. Your Mazel is the level of Ayin. And there's more to be said on this topic, but that's the story. So are we subject to the laws of nature? Look, we have laws of nature we are subject to. But fundamentally, Ayid is connected to a place that's higher than Seder Ishtalshlus, to Ayin, higher than the Mitzias Elamus, the existence, and therefore can connect to that. So even though there may be, Mitzad the Mazel, you may have been born a certain month or something in the Mazel, that doesn't mean it imposes itself and predetermines your life. It's a predisposition. Okay, good. Next question, 770. Why is 770 not kept neater? Yeah. So here's the two questions that came in over the months. Number one, why is 770 in such a bad condition? Isn't it possible to make the place nicer and cleaner? Isn't a place of prayer supposed to be beautiful? Is it lack of funds? Thanks. Another person wrote, Tikkun. Hi Rab Simon, how are you? This question will probably be one of the funnier questions you receive. I daven in 770 every day, although the shul is taken care of very well. There's one issue that bothers me a lot. Every time I wash my hands before davening, there's never any paper towels to wipe one's hands with, besides on Shabbos. They have these blowers which don't... I can't control myself, sorry. They have these blowers which don't even blow out hot air. We have to remember 770 is not a regular shul. It's the Rebbe's base medrash, Lubavitch World Headquarters. So you're wondering, why am I writing to you? Why don't I talk to the Gaboyim? It's exactly what I was wondering. The answer is quite simple. I'm not going to get too far. Perhaps a group of Gvirim can get together, wealthy people, and sponsor the paper towels for the whole year. How much it would cost? 20 grand a year? I have heard of or read somewhere that the Rebbe once bemoaned by Fabrengen that there's no towel by the sink to wipe one's hands with, and when there's a towel, it's soaking wet. Messiah and Betev. Okay, well, everything, this program, you never know what's going to come your way. So first I want to refer you to episode 132, which is interesting. I did speak about something about 770 and decorum and so on. The two questions actually contradict each other. The second one says it's being taken care of for 770. The other one says it's not. Well, let's start with, first of all, there's a Shulchan Aruch. I mentioned before everything is Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch has very clear rules and laws about Hilchos Beis HaKnesses, the cleanliness of it, keeping it even nicer than your own home. It's a Mokum Kodesh, it's a Migdash Ma'at, it's a Beis HaMikdash. And we all, at least some of us know, once the Rebbe himself, at times when he saw something that was on the floor, he would pick up a piece of paper, garbage, and so on. Once the Rebbe came to daven at the Amid, I think it was Memches, in front of 770. As he comes to the Amid by Mizrach, he sees a few bags behind the Amid, there near the Aron Kodesh. The Rebbe looks, calls over, what is this? You could hear on the tape, on the video, how upset the Rebbe was. Ashul. He says, Ashul, was kommt es da? And then the Rebbe says, I'm only given the meaning at the Shamish flegemi dein Bord. Bressman the pole, Bressman the floor, which means he would go with his beard and sweep the floor. The Rebbe says, mit the Bord, mit the eigene Bord. He would sweep the floor of a shul. Could see the Rebbe's aggravation. So let's make one thing clear. There's no justification for an unclean and unneat and disorganized shul. I know we all say this when we tell people who come, we say it's the engine room of Lubavitch, the engine room of the world. Engine rooms don't look very clean. If you go into the boiler rooms, you go to the bottom of a ship. That's all a nice explanation and maybe has some value to it. But at the end of the day, a shul has halachas. And as I just described, shul has to be neat, especially the Rebbe's shul. So I don't know, there's no excuse for it. It's a matter of all of us cooperating. The Gaboim have to do their part. But remember, it's a shul of thousands of people. The Gaboim can't be following everyone around. And just looking at the Rebbe's sensitivity to how clean the shul should be, each of us thought of it as such. And we treated a shul like it's our own personal domain, and the holy domain, Migdash Ma'at, especially the Rebbe's shul, it would change. So I look at ourselves, I look at myself, I look at you. I don't think we can blame somebody. As far as the paper towels go, I don't know. I mean, I use those blowers, and I think they did blow hot air, but I'm not going to go into a debate on this topic. I mean, it's probably to save money. I'm not going to get into the discussion why not use paper towels. Yes, use paper towels. That should be brought up with the Gabayim. It's not my area of expertise. No, definitely not my domain of authority. So, but I reiterate again, a shul has to be clean, neat, and that's what the kavanah of a shul is, period. No excuses. Okay. Next question is really a request favor that I was asked of me. Hi, Rabbi Jacobson. I have a request. If you can do me a favor, it might sound interesting. I suffer from depression and anxiety. It came to the point that I feel I need to take something to give me some relief. I'm not a big fan of medication, so I'm wondering if I can use your show, if you can throw out a question to your audience and inquire if anybody has been helped with these kind of issues through alternative medicine by a homeopathic doctor, etc. As you said, your show is an interactive community forum, and if people respond with the name of doctor or doctors, please you can forward it to my email, and he gives us his email. Thanks in advance. Hatzlacha Rabbe, Psuris Tevis. So I'm doing exactly that, a request of one of the listeners. If anybody has any leads or directives is helping a person, I'm sure it could help others as well. And since we're already on the topic, it's a good opportunity, since I do have the public forum here. If you do have recommendations in mental health or other areas, please share them, and we will have a list of resources. So in case anybody does contact us, either privately or something I read on the weekly program, we can direct them to different individuals. Obviously, all this is confidential, so whatever you share, you don't have to share your name. If you do share your name, it will be completely confidential, anonymous, but I will pass it on to this fellow. And again, I really feel honored to be able to offer this service, that we can all help each other, because you never know who you know, a referral, a reference, a lead, and so on. Okay. Now we have a bunch of follow-ups, but because of the Mezuzah and other issues, I see I'm not going to have the time to do it. So I apologize. I will do one follow-up. That way at least we'll get one done, and I'll do the others next week and the following weeks. One of the topics we spoke about in previous episodes, what defines a Chabad Chassid? So a few comments came in. I'll just read them. 3 comments, to be specific. One, a Chassidus that is a generation without a Rebbe is forced to ask that very "who are we" type of question. I don't know if I would agree with that. We're not a generation without a Rebbe. The Ma'ulahalanu emid mishamish afkanu emid mishamish reyet sein lo yazer tzein marise. A Rebbe never forsakes his people. A Rebbe geit kem l'shtavek, as the Radatz's father told him after the Rebbe Marash's istalkus. And that comment too says, but we have a Rebbe. Okay. And a third comment was, I think a Chassid Chabad is someone who uses everything in the world, including technology, to spread Yiddishkeit and Chassidus. For a Bocher not to have a phone that was good, maybe in the times of the Rebbe Rashab. Now Bocher can spread Yiddishkeit in their free time if they have a phone. Okay, there's something up for discussion. I'm not going to comment more on that. Finally, there was another issue with a follow-up on secular studies in schools. Hi, Rabbi Jacobson. I would like to understand what's all the paranoia with the government and the secular education in the schools. From my understanding, it's not that the government wants to take over our schools. They just want the kids to have basic knowledge of English language and math and the like, to be able to navigate society after they finish their studies in school. Was it the Rebbe's intention that we shouldn't know how to read and write and know basic math? I think there's an overreaction here. I think you can be frum and chassidish and be educated and have parnasa b'archava. Why do the frum have to be poor? I don't think the Rebbe's intentions were that frum Jews should be struggling with parnasa. I think many things have changed with higher education for the frum community, where you have frum colleges separate from men and women. Whereas when the Rebbe spoke about going to university, he was concerned that people should drift away from Yiddishkeit because of it. I think times have changed and we need to chill out a little bit. Well, I don't know if you listened to the program. I addressed this very directly. I don't agree with some of the things you're saying. Just go back to those episodes. I'm trying to remember which episodes they were. I didn't mark it down. But it's basically a few weeks ago. It was probably episodes 239, 240, 241 that I spoke about this. And I don't, as I said, some of the things you say I agree with. But the question really is here, what makes parnasa? Is it necessarily higher education? And most importantly, the government doesn't have to be intervening. We're smart enough, we're a Jewish people, have been here for thousands of years, we could figure it out. And if we have an issue, we'll deal with it ourselves, and internally we'll figure out what to empower our young men and women. And if you look at it, our young women and women, thank God, if you talk about the trouble that you see in the secular world, we don't have most of those issues. Yes, there are things to talk about. We talked about it in previous episodes. I just wanted to read it for the record. Okay. Let me go now. The other follow-ups, as I said, I'll do next week. The Chassidus question. God, in or out? We were taught that God is outside of us. In Chassidus, I learned something new. We all have a piece of God in us. What should be the meditation by davening? On one hand, it says, Da lefnei mi'ata emed, which means to stand, note before whom you stand. We also take 3 steps back, which seems to be in line with the idea that God is something outside us. Then Chassidus talks about how davening is the Aveda to reveal the peace of God that is inside us. I just asked a question. I forgot to thank you for the service to humanity. Your lectures, website, books, etc. is amazing and has a great impact on my life. Yesher Koyach. Okay. So God, inside or out. So I discussed this in episode 83. Since this was rephrased a bit, I'll respond briefly, but in episode 83 I discussed it more at length. So first of all, there's a Maimer Chazal that says, Hu mekeme shel elam ve'ena elam mekeme. God is the space of the world, or he occupies the space. God is existence, but existence is not God. Eina elam mekeme. So God is the entirety of God is far beyond existence, and therefore outside of existence. Outside meaning not outside of physical space, but beyond. You can't say, like pantheism, Spinoza argued, God is nature, nature is God. No. God is nature, but nature is not God. God is space, but space is not God. God is a lot more. That's why we say, Havaya hu Elikim. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. What's this Havaya hu Elikim? Havaya Elokeinu, always, in everything. Elokim is God as he manifests in nature. Elokim is Bigematria Hateva, the nature. Havaya is the God that transcends nature and transcends existence. Havaya Elokim is that the God that's beyond is the God that's within. So I wouldn't say outside in, because as the Kotzker Rebbe said, they asked him as a child, they asked him, where is God? So he said, where is God not? Well, they said, we'll give you a penny if you tell us where God is. He said, I'll give you a penny if you tell me where God is not. So God is within everything, but he's not defined by the everything. So the answer is both. We talk Sevav Kalam and Mamala Kalam, Mamala Kalam and Mamala, as in Hu Mekeme Shalelim. He's Mamala Es HaMokem. He fills the space. And then we say God is beyond, Es HaShemayim V'Sa'aretz Ani Mole. He fills the earth, but then we say God is beyond existence. And then he's even beyond the beyond, as Chassidus elaborates upon. And then he joins all together. Because the God that's beyond the beyond can join the God Elokim and Havaya. Anochi combines Havaya and Elokim. That's the short of it. What it means in practical applied Chassidus, applied to our lives, is that there are theories that speak about a God that's beyond us. You want to have a relationship with God, you have to live an ascetic lifestyle. Go out of your natural order and routines. Others say, no, there's no such thing as beyond. God is right here. God is nature, and nature is God. And you'll find God in your personal life. Be ethical, be kind, and so on. Both are not complete. The first one is ignoring existence, and God created existence, and yes, manifested himself in existence, and even manifested himself in 10 spheres, though he's beyond them. Is so-called an image in which we created the divine human being, the created B'Tselem Elokim, the divine image. God has no image because he's beyond image. But he chose a part of himself, so to speak. He chose to manifest the reflection of the divine in a structure, and that part of God is within us. So when you say Chelik Elikam Emal Mamish, when you say that you are the Tselem Elokim, that your life, your chesed, when you do kindness, you emulate God's kindness. V'alachta b'drachav, mahu chanun afata chanun, mahu racham afata racham. You're emulating God's ways. Our faculties are aligned with God's attributes. That's how God manifested in existence, and that we need to have, because that's the kavanah, dira b'tachtenim. But if you only have that, you're not having the experience of the divine beyond existence, the awe of recognizing the reimamus of Ein Sof, the haflah, the grandeur, the magic, the mystery of the divine. So how do you reconcile the two? So we have both. There are times where we experience the divine within us, when you thank God for food, for sustenance, for life, for shelter, for all the blessings. That's God as he relates to you. And then you come to realize there's a God beyond you. And the God that's beyond is one with the God that's within. So we both have transcendence, but without asceticism. And we don't have just limited ourselves in the material world. We also can experience the transcendence that's beyond existence together with the divine within existence. And together they all will come, of course, when Mashiach comes, will be the completion of both dimensions. By the third dimension, so we have the Atzmus, Sevav, and Mamala. Okay, now let's do the essays This is still essays from last year's 2018 contest. We'll continue reviewing them until we run out of them or until we begin the essays of this year's contest. And I mention again the essay contest, your chance to both express your voice, Chassidus relevant in a personal issue or a global issue or some contemporary life challenge or issue, using Chassidus to address that issue, and you can win bonus $10,000, because even just doing that is already a reward, but getting also $10,000 for the effort is potential first is the first prize. Second prize $3,600, third prize $1,000, and a fourth $500 prize specifically exclusively for students. So now let's go to the essay contest, to the essays of this week. One is the first one, the value of our constant struggles. Sara Schwartz, age 32, Granada Hills, California. That's consistent to some of the things we spoke about today. Do you ever feel you are constantly repeating the same struggles? Keep hitting the same walls and getting stuck. It feels so frustrating, whether your negative thoughts are clothed in anxiety, depression, addiction, laziness, self-consciousness, or lust. If you are human, you have them, and you wish you could just get rid of them. You want to be healed, happy. Trust me, friend, you're not alone. We regular humans all struggle with these internal battles. In chapters 27 and 28 of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe redefines our life's mission as embracing our internal struggles and discovering the advantageous purposes of having them. This essay will explore this topic. And yes, and she goes on to explore it in a very personal way. I really like reading this. And how we must accept the reality that we are created to struggle, fight one battle at a time, and number 3, feel the reward of winning and of the satisfaction we give to God. Very good application of Tanya's, those chapters, and with practical ideas at the end that really can help a person, I think, in a very realistic way. So this essay, as all other essays that we review each week, are posted at meaningfullife.com/mylife. And as well, if you subscribe to our weekly email, we send out the new essays as they're posted. Essay number 1. Okay, second essay is Transcendental Mediation in Light of Chassidus. Dovid Bressman, age 35, Los Angeles, California. His job is a mediator. This essay, I must say, extremely impressive. And it did receive one of the highest marks. I just read them, as I mentioned a few weeks ago, last week, that I read them not necessarily in the right order, but this is a top-notch essay. I am a certified mediator, Dovid writes. Mediation is also known as alternative dispute resolution, ADR. I took an interest in this field a couple of years after I received ordination for Dayanis, rabbinical judicial ordination. I will address how one can overcome stark differences and discord when differences cannot be worked out between individuals. I call this method Chassidic Transcendental Mediation. The tools to overcome discord are found in the Chassidic sources I will present. I will note that this article can benefit both an experienced mediator and a layman. I personally think must read, especially if you're interested in these matters and who doesn't have challenges like this. And he goes on to firstly to explain mediation, facilitative mediation, evaluative mediation, toolbox mediation, and then in mediation in light of Chassidus. A true contribution, I think, to that bridge between a real issue in our times and the Chassidic contribution to it, Chassidic insights and perspective about Machriya and with the different sources from Sichos and different places that he cites. Excellent essay, really. I'm going to think of a way that we should probably, more than just post this, but probably make it very prominent because it really can be part of different mediation methodologies and processes. If you're in that field, I definitely recommend reading it, or even if you're not in the field, as I said, it has true value. Okay, the third essay for today is Increased Motivation for Change After Repeated Failures in Hebrew. Hagboras HaMotivatzia L'Shinui L'Acher Kishlonot Chazrim V'Nishnim. Tirtza Butman, age 46, Ramat, HaSharon, Israel, Ashlucha. Okay. It's based on the Likutei Sichos, volume 6, page 57 to 68. And it really is all about, exactly as the title implies, to go the difficulties of life and how really they become a catalyst, a catapult you to creating true change. Personalizes it in a very personal way with a real story and a case study, so to speak, and then goes on to say how, based on that sikha, which goes into the whole discussion of tshuva and making mistakes and correcting from mistakes, how we can learn from that, this approach of after what failure can really end up becoming is a tremendous tool for success and growth and change. Spells it out with different stages. First stage being which we call Lahav Ilahimin, which is to love and to believe God. Lahasis Lahazid, to be careful and to be cautious, and spells it out in a bunch of steps that anyone can apply to this issue of challenges, failures, and how they can motivate you to change. Okay. With that, we conclude the essays of this week. Good. And we conclude this week's episode 243. So everyone should have a very good Chedesh, a freilichen Chedesh, a good Chedesh Shevat, a Chedesh of Iskashus, a Chedesh that we connect even stronger with the Rebbe, of all the Rabbeim, through him to all the Rabbeim and what they wanted of us in bringing the Deir Shvi of Ishachanti B'Seicham, implementing and bringing Chassidus to life in our personal lives, to all those we come in contact with. Got a very good Chedesh. We're here every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. And I remind you again about participating in this year's contest. It's a live contest now, and all the guidelines and rules are available online, meaningfullife.com/contest. And everyone have a very blessed week, as I said, a good Chedesh, and we'll see each other again next Sunday. Be well.